Awesome. So hi everybody, my name's Nylander, for those that don't know me. Today we've got a really interesting panel, so I'm going to ask all the panellists to join me on the stage, so I'm not all lonely on my own. And then we will kick off. You all comfy?
Oh, totally.
Good. So when I got asked to moderate this panel, I was really excited because as well as working in marketing, I also am doing an MBA at the moment. And one of the things that's really interesting about being on the MBA program is because I often get people who work in finance and insurance and they go to me like, Lou, is this what you do? And a lot of the time I'm like, nah. Or they ask me like, Lou, what's the 4 Ps? And I'm like, product, price. So when I got asked to chair this panel, I thought I was actually really excited because I think it's something that we really need to get into. So first of all, I'll ask all of the panelists to introduce themselves. So let's start off with you, Joe.
So I'm Joe Goldberg. I head up the brand strategy team at Santander.
Hi everyone, I'm Chloe Davies. I'm Head of Social Impact at Lucky Generals.
I am Kanchan and I head the digital and gaming partnerships at Papa John's.
Hi, I'm Kelvin Cery. I'm the VP of Client Development and Brand Partnerships at BENlabs.
Perfect. So let's kind of kick off because we've got a lot of questions to go through, not that much time, and I want to get some spicy debate going on. So let's think about the first question. Do we need new fundamentals of brand marketing? Joe, I'm going to come to you first. What do you think?
Well, look, no, I think there's a lot of guff about science and precision and all the like. I think the challenge for marketers is always going to be how do you find a way to be original, differentiated, and relevant to your customers to drive attention and appeal, and ultimately so they buy your products. And I think in terms of just the pure brand marketing pieces, that will always, I think, remain the same. What's changed, I think, is there are just more channels for us to manage. And you can either spend more on each channels, but I think the mistake I think we are continuing to make as an industry is thinking that because we've got more channels, we can afford to put lower quality content through those channels. And I think, particularly in digital, just because an email's free, for example, doesn't mean it has to be shit. And you know, I think that for me is the bottom line. You know, I think we probably all have sent out embarrassing stuff on CRM or on a banner that has not been given the same love as our TV ad, and I think you need to give everything the same love and attention.
I'm going to say I've never sent a shit email. I'm just going to put that I'm joking. I'm joking. Chloe, do you agree?
I have a different answer because I haven't traditionally come from marketing, so I don't think like traditional marketeers do. So basically, whatever you were doing before wasn't necessarily working. Otherwise, a role like mine wouldn't have been created in the first place. And so it's to adapt the thought process to what we think we're doing, what we've always done, and are we actually doing it well? And I think that's my parameter of where I live. In that for a lot of people, if it isn't broke, we won't fix it because we've always done it this certain way and it's always paid off. But have you actually evolved that because you've always been doing the same thing? And if you think outside the box, then are you going to get a whole new world of results and a whole new way of thinking? I come from social impact, DE&I, which is the everyday thing. It's not a nice to have. It's not black square summer because you feel like you have to do it and you have no choice. Like, it's an everyday thing. So you have to adapt the everyday of how you do marketing and not just, well, this is this or this is that. So my thing is I'm in that in-between place of being disruptive because that's what the world outside is asking for, and inside we just think we're doing it right and we're not.
I didn't say we're doing it right.
Oh no,
I just said I think the fundamentals haven't changed.
Kelvin, what are your thoughts? And are you on Chloe's side, Joe's side?
So I've got my own opinions on this. So appreciating what Joe's position on this, and I think what he says is, you know, very, very strong. However, I think that, you know, looking at the landscape as it is today, it's becoming increasingly more complex, right? The last 10 years, we've seen huge change. That is not going to slow down. With the advent of AI, what we're going to see is an increase in the rate of change, and our lives are going to be impacted. Our workflow is going to be impacted by that. So what we need to do is to take the fundamentals that Joe's referring to, but find ways that we can adapt and adopt and make sure that we are taking whatever technology is out there, and applying that to make us better decision makers, to inform our brand strategy. So for me, there is undoubtedly like relevance in the tech argument that is going to support what you guys are doing on a brand level.
Kanchan.
I think the heart of any marketing campaign is a happy customer. And that comes from some of these basic fundamentals, just understanding your customer, listening to them, listening to the feedback. But just like Kelvin said, the tools and tactics have changed over time. We have a lot more conversation now on people even buying groceries from apps now, which has just spiked in the last 2 years. So just the way people shop, make those purchasing decisions, that has changed. But I feel the basic principles, the underlying principles are still the same at the end of the day. And
if I can just add a little bit to that, I think the key part we're missing here is like we understand what's working. I think the secret now is understanding why it's working, right? And I think what we've done historically is lean into data to inform that. We lean into what we call the structured data, and that's the data that fits easily onto spreadsheets. It's the demographics, it's the metadata, it's the performance data, it's stuff that we as humans can easily compartmentalize and make sense of. But I said that's only 10% of the situation, right? And the other 90%, the richest part of the data, is in like the audio visual content. It's buried deep in there that we as humans find very difficult to process, and you need sophisticated tech to understand that, to make sense of it, to make forecasts from it, and therefore to inform brand strategies. I think that's like a super important part that we're going to see becoming more and more relevant over the next few years.
And also thinking about what's going to become relevant over the next few years. I think thinking about marketing fundamentals, trust, purpose and ESG are now sort of becoming much more important in sort of marketing mix and when people are putting together strategies and campaigns. So thinking about, when you study marketing and you go to uni and you learn about the 4 Ps, do you think that needs to be changed and have a more of a focus on purpose and moving forward? And Chloe, what are your thoughts in this area?
That doesn't still apply anymore to the fundamentals of everything that we're talking about. People can create it for themselves outside. They don't have to go and do
You don't have to go to uni.
You don't have to go to uni.
Yeah.
And actually, you can create a brand in your home and then take the tools and apply them yourself without ever working with a marketing team. And so when you are driven by who you are, the communities that you want to feed into, what you're passionate about, and people create a whole business on that, and then people come together and they collaborate with each other. Some of the biggest concepts that we see for like Adidas and actually creative outside, like Courtiers and Nike, there are so many different ways in which we work now that's rooted in people and the purpose and the impact that they create, that it's always going to change, and we have to catch up and adapt. We are reactive, we're not proactive. And so to your point, like how people get into this industry has completely changed. I didn't come from this industry, and yet the work that I've collectively done with my agency has changed industries. So you have to adapt your thought process. And I think as we evolve, if we don't continue to do that, then we're just going to stay in the same place that we are. So we have to adapt our way of thinking. And I don't think that's necessarily a really easy thing to do, but talking and things like this is what's going to help.
And Kanchan, do you have anything to add on this area?
I think I'm completely agree. Sometimes it just, as an example, in 2020, again during pandemic, one of the things that we realized is instead of, when everyone was struggling, instead of just spending money on the big fancy holiday campaign, we actually completely stripped it down. We had all of us in head office creating doodles, snowmans and everything, and we actually printed that on the box. It just came from a pure place, which is instead of us spending all this marketing budget towards a fancy campaign, why not actually work with charities like Crisis and actually make a difference? And that kind of purpose of being present in that situation, that drove much more value than just doing another fancy campaign. So. Yeah.
I'm having some mic issues. Hang on. No clue how that happened. Sorry, I've lost my trail of thought because of that. Moving forward, though, how do we create authenticity then, based on what we're talking about? If actually it's about the people, it needs to be people-centric and purpose-led. Can brands still be authentic in that space?
I think so.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm quite fascinated by this idea I don't come from the marketing industry, because I doubt there's very few marketers that would say, I've worked in marketing now for nearly 20 years, and I would never say I came from the marketing industry. It's not something you're born into. The best marketers in my mind are not people that have gone and read their McDonald's and their Kotlers and now their Bar and Sharps. It's people exactly as you described, who've got a passion for what their product's about, and there is humanity in their product. Now, I appreciate I work for a bank, but I appreciate that also.
I was going to say something, Kelvin, before I got the chance.
And actually, the reason why I work for a bank is because it's the last holy grail of this challenge. So I've worked on loads of brands. I've worked on Love Honey and sex toys. I've worked on drink. I've worked on my career at Mars in chocolate. I've found my way through marketing. I started my career actually in politics. I started in the Labour Party as a speechwriter, and I think ideas and passion points are really, really important. It's what drives success. I think consumers know when someone like Ben Francis is selling Gymshark, there's a piece of Ben inside it, right? That's what makes it much more tangible. It's why I see it in the gyms more than the Nike and Adidas. And people, unlike Adidas top, Nike bottom, Diodora shoes or whatever, they're Gymshark top to bottom because they want to badge themselves and say, I am buying into that guy's business. That's why I think purpose is so powerful, because I think today's Gen Z, new generation, they want to know that a business has morals, is also doing its bit to make the world better. And if they can see that, and if they believe that, and if it reflects their identity, I think they'll buy into it. And what I think digital does is it's democratized marketing, because you no longer need to have £2 million to make a noise. You could start with 10k, you could start with 200 quid and start to make some noise on Twitter with your business. If you've got an idea, you've got a branding around it, and what I love about these events is you meet lots of people who manage to start the business. Now, the last thing I'd say about purpose is where big corporations get it wrong. So I think Bud Light, terrible, right? I think the whole sort of dilemma of anything is, it's crazy to be sitting there as a beer manufacturer where your core markets are rednecks in the South America thinking that's going to serve you well, or it's actually going to serve the trans community well. And that for me is the point. There has to be a marriage between where you're positioning yourselves and the contribution we can make. Now, come back to the bank. We know that we're part of the climate change ecosystem. We know that we have to manage that, and therefore we have to make commitments on sustainability. It's relevant to what we're doing about. That's why it's one of the core pillars of our communication strategy is clear piece on climate change. We know that financial inclusion is something that we have an important, which is a massive impact on social inclusion, which is why we have a scholarships program and why we give tens of thousands of scholarships away every year to try and help people get through not just university now, actually, but through entire education. It's why we've actually reviewed our own recruitment policies. We're no longer looking for 2-1s to get people into the bank, but we'll accept any degree at all, because we recognise that you can assess talents and all these things. So how you walk, I think, has to come first, especially if you're big like us. We are relatively big, we're not the biggest. And before you talk. If you're small, I think you've got less accountability probably for what you're doing, and you can get found out later and close the gap.
No, I agree.
And who's doing it well?
No, I agree with you, but I also think how you walk, you have to know where you're walking.
Yeah.
And so we still have a conversation in marketing about how you got into marketing, and where we make those conversations at a high level is because they're marketeers that always have been in marketing, that got into marketing, that went and did degrees and wanted to be in marketing. And so that was to my point. I never actually wanted to be in marketing and just ended up here.
So
and
did I.
It's the sum. You know what I mean? It was like, I think I've worked in every industry, and that's actually helped how I do what I do. It's that diversity of thought. And so I think there's no one person that's doing it incredibly well, because the work's not finished. I think there are amazing people who are getting it right in the day-to-day and have had some really compelling things. But I think also when you kind of name, oh, well, it's this person, it's this person, it's this person, you don't also know what's going on in people's wheelhouse. So I can say, like, this is my opinion and what I like. I'm always going to talk about my own, because we worked really hard, but we're also open to flaws, and there's still work to do. So I think it's about how we celebrate the people who are passionate, who are really in it for the right reasons, and therefore their work is compelling and engaging, and everybody else is tapping into that rather than like the box tick.
I think I think Joe's right. There's some really bad examples of how people have got this wrong.
Yeah.
But there are also some very good examples of how brands get it right. And I think one of the brands that we work with are a great case in point here. So we work closely with Reckitt, specifically with the Durex brand. And Durex, for years have aligned themselves with playful sex, with safe sex, and with the LGBTQ community. So there's an authenticity that already exists with them. So what we've done for Durex is to take that positioning and then to help them to amplify that by working with huge creators, with musicians, like we're talking about sort of A-list artists such as Lil Nas X, Sam Smith, to integrate their brands into their music video content, and then to look at the social space around that, to use our proprietary AI to understand, where we should be positioning that message to amplify it in the best way so it has the most powerful impact on the communities that they want to reach. So I think they do it well. There are examples of where it's maybe done nowhere near as well.
Talking about, I'm going to change tack a little bit now. Joe, you sort of mentioned the Gen Z audience and stuff, and we talked about being authentic and stuff like that. And I think I've noticed, particularly with work that I do with Brixton Finishing School and DigiLearning, that when I'm talking to sort of young people that want to get into marketing and advertising now, the viewpoint that they're coming from it is totally different to the way that I came into the industry, as in thinking I had to do a degree. I didn't do a marketing degree, but I did do a degree and stuff like that. And they've got all their side hustles and they're doing some quite interesting and innovative work. So when we're thinking about the Gen Z audience, because they're already creating their own content, have got their side hustles, how can brands and marketers now sort of adapt and do work that's truly authentic for people that are in that space? And anyone can go for it. Go on, Kanchan, you go.
I think Gen Zs are slightly built differently. I agree with that. And it's not just the age, but also cultural influence. We grew up with Lion King. They grew up with Up as their childhood movie. But I think other than that, when it comes to brands trying to reach out to Gen Z, number one would be just put your values first, because they want to be connected with the brands who share the same values as them. So be it the LGBTQ space, racial diversity, or even environment sustainability. The ones who share the values are the ones who stick around the most, is what I've seen. And second, I think we spoke about it, I think, in the earlier session about taking a joke on yourself. Because we've seen when we interact with Gen Z, especially on social media channels, Twitter, TikTok, etc., we've seen that the more we are real with them and don't talk like a typical brand, the more they interact. So we've had long conversations with some of the Gen Z audiences, and they are the most loyal ones that we've seen. So be real is another one. And I think third thing is just finding the right platform. If it's Gen Z, TikTok is one of the most spoken about platforms. So, but we've seen that instead of people just relying or believing a social ad on TikTok, they believe a lot more in influencers. So just finding the right influencers, working with them, and just adding value to what you're doing. One of the examples I would like to give here is Ryanair. They're doing a great job on TikTok. I know that airlines don't have, usually are not known for their sense of humor, but Ryanair does this really well. They entertain, they even poke fun at people who say, I'm never flying Ryanair again. So I really like that space they are into.
I mean, I think it's really, I wasn't sure whether your question was about people getting into the industry or whether it was about connecting with them as customers.
It was more about connecting with them as customers.
So we have a great debate at Santander at the moment because our chief customer officer went to some global conference internally, and Brazil are doing some cool stuff on TikTok. Comes back and says, God, I hope this doesn't go out on videos.
Should have thought about that before you said it, Joe.
So he's like, why aren't we doing this? So my CMO's like, what we need to do, let's stand up a social media team again. And we're looking at what's it. Now, I am absolutely, I'm the guy in the room, one of the older people in the room. And I'm like, we need to meet consumers where they're at. They are not interested in a TikTok about a bloody current account. Look at my statty card. And even my competitors, so Monzo and Starling, I sit on the, again, go to banking conferences there at Blast. So, people go, oh, Monzo's amazing, right? It's got a 10-second sign-up journey and you get a cool card. I think the standard for cool is pretty low, and that's where I work. Now, I'm like, my social media team are like, well, we're not going to make videos about bloody pasta bakes, are we, Joe? And I'm like, why aren't we? So this has now become the strategy of pasta bakery at Santander. We generally call it pasta bakery, because if I am a young person that's just starting and I've left home and I'm finally got to actually eat nourishing food, right? Why can't Santander just put movies out? Sorry, not movies, they're called TikToks. Movies. Why can't we put clips or videos out of like cool meals? Why can't we engage our customers on their favourite 10-minute, quick, nutritious £5 meals, right? And actually, all we're going to do is put a badge on the bottom of being the useful channel in banking that's around financial services. Now, this is my hunch. This is just my hunch. This is the live debate at Santander. Because people go, you're absolutely nuts. And I'm like, but I think banks are frightened to get into proper conversations with consumers where they're at. And so I think that's authentic, I think it's helpful, it's meeting consumers where they're at, and I think that's what content looks like today. By the way, and it's going back to the first question, I don't think that's fundamentally different to what was there before. Why did Sony chuck a whole load of bouncy balls down a hill in in San Francisco back in the 90s? Because it was cool. And I think it would be cool for a bank, let's be clear, for a bank, to make
only for a bank.
To make pasta baker videos or content that's relevant to their things, or 5 things I wish I knew on my first day of my job, or stuff that's just genuinely useful, helpful content that is going to be casually absorbed. Now, the critical thing is what you're talking about, which I think is you've got to measure, right? Is your work having impact? And so the only thing that is great about marketing today is the tools we have to measure the effectiveness of what we do. And that bit is interesting. But I think to always do almost pre-work and pre-test, I think we're going to end up with a bunch of average work that won't cut through. So you've got to be courageous, you've got to be bold. I saw the Nike Air video, by the way. I recommend anyone that's interested in marketing should go and see the Air video, because it's just so awesome in terms of, there's a guy who's just got an absolute belief, I'm going to lay all my bets on one big idea, I'm going to be courageous, I'm going to sponsor, I'm going to make a shoe around an athlete. And I think as marketers, you're hearing here, there's a whole lot of young people that've got passion points, are just going to put their ideas on the table, they're going to put it all out there. I think big brands are competing with that, because you can't compete with someone at a poker table that's going to go all in. You've got your idea, you've got your belief, you've got to go with it, and you've got to stop talking about yourself and talking about where customers are at. And I think part of that is purpose, because they're angry with the way the world is at the moment. These people are younger people coming to workforce today. We know they are the first generation to think that the world will be poorer than it was when they die. They don't think their life is going to get better. 51% of them think there's going to be life not going to be better. 60,000 people in the UK versus 30,000 just 4 years ago are now on a mental health waiting list. We know that Britain isn't happy. And I think, as a bank, we know that we need to start solving their problems, and it's probably not about whether their credit card is accepted somewhere or not. It's about real life issues, about how I get on, and lots of complex issues.
Do we really think a bank can solve people's problems, though?
No, but we can talk to them about it, right? So we're really passive. The thing about banking is we're in everyone's value chain, and we're not, if you want to go to the supermarket, we're there. You don't think about us. If you want to buy a house, we're there. If you want to do home improvements, we go on holiday. There's nothing that you do that involves money that doesn't involve your bank. At some point, it comes through your current account. Now, what banks do, and I describe the problem in banking as, if you were sick and we were in the medical profession, we would make you come to us, tell us what's wrong with you, and say, I think I'd like 3 rounds of chemo and maybe a bit of radio at the end. And we'd check our regulatory requirements. I think I could sign that off. That is a really shit customer experience. And then actually, if you had another ailment that you wanted to also address, we'd make you go and see someone else, and then even if you were in the same GP surgery, we wouldn't talk to you about your mortgage, your credit card, your savings in one coagulated way. That's not acceptable. So for us, a lot of the challenge around the product mix, the experience that has to then be supported. But I think that the financial services is a very unique industry. We're very passive. I think we need to be more involved in consumers' lives if we're going to be and connected to the real things that they're talking about. And as I said at the beginning, they're not talking about the APR on their credit card.
They're talking about pasta.
Well, they're talking about how do I want to go to Glastonbury and how am I going to pay for the ticket. And
Is it
things.
talking to or talking at?
I think with.
Because it's like the talking with means that they're actually engaged in the work that we're making, that they're part of the work that we're making, that we're not talking on their behalf, that we're not guessing who they are, what they want, what the data says. Like, actually ask people instead of like we're coming out with this new idea because the data says or the app says. Exactly. Like, you actually have to engage all of these people in the work that you create, because when you don't, they're going to call us out for it quicker than you can blink on Twitter, on social. Like, you've heard this the whole day. Like, that when we talk about purpose, that's an everyday thing. It's not a nice to have. Like, our next generation, that's the world that they've grown up with. They know the answers to the questions that we who are in these positions are still trying to work out for them on a global scale. And if they don't like what we do, they will go around and turn around and criticize on it and then make something better. So if you don't have them and meet them where they're at and engage them in the work and compensate them for it, then this is going to be a vicious cycle, and then we will be the ones that are extinct and elite, and they will go and create it for themselves outside. So to your point, absolutely, but the time for passive in all industries is over.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you will have somebody else create it bigger and better. Once upon a time, I would only have gone, I knew it when it was Abbey National, but I would only have come to Santander. Now they'll come to Monzo, they'll come to Starling, they'll go to Daylight and want to put their money where their mouth is.
I think interestingly, in our what's happened in banking is that people are much more profligate. So, you know, I think when you and I were, you know, you had one bank account, maybe two if you were a little bit naughty.
Got about 4 now. How naughty am I?
Yeah, exactly that. So I think that people are very profligate in financial services, and you know, we still talk at Santander about main current account, and I'm like, what even is that? Is that the one you're using to buy shit, or is it the one where you put your salary in, or is it the one you pay your bills out of, or is it the one you've set up because you want to save for a holiday? And I think that, you know, so your point is really cute, and my industry doesn't quite get it yet.
Yeah. It comes back to knowing your role in the space, I think, you know, and if you step outside of your zone, then people will call you out for it. And we work with a lot of gaming brands, and it is ruthless in that space. Coca-Cola came in a year or so ago, tried to do stuff that the communities just didn't want to know about, and absolutely assassinate. So you need to know what your role is when you come into these conversations. The other thing you need to be mindful of is what the messaging that you're creating is all about, because the other option is to jump on these ephemeral moments, these, you know, really short-term opportunities that Gen Z present you with, but Gen Z wait for no one. And I don't want to speak for Santander, but I assume there's processes and probably
that's right.
things
are slow. We're working on our Wes Anderson TikTok as we speak. So
you know, the whole thing would be to create your own agenda there and have a purpose to be in that conversation.
Yeah, because when you don't, then you get those sort of Kendall Jenner moments in Pepsi where you've got people just creating stuff that's quite frankly trash. I knew this was going to happen. We don't have long left. I really want to leave time for questions. So to the audience, just start prepping for your questions now. I'm going to ask the panel some wrap questions, and then I'll give you a couple of minutes to ask questions because we're standing in between you and lunch. So I better hurry up. So I think we've talked about so many different things, but one of the things that I really wanted to get to is, do we think that we have the right skill sets in marketing at the moment? Kanchan, I'm going to go to you first on this one.
Yeah, sure. I think the definition of skill sets that has changed over time, but I would still go for one thing. After pandemic, one of the things that have happened is the ways of working. We've moved to hybrid and remote working models, and more than ever we need leaders who can bring people together, because the kind of complex, sophisticated campaigns that we all have been talking about to execute, we need to bring people together, and sometimes that's not possible remotely. So I think people skills, especially in leadership positions, I think that's one of the things that's required today.
Perfect. Chloe?
Yeah, our problem's not skills. Our issue is emotion. I feel that.
What we have now.
No, in this industry, we have some of the most amazing creative people across all lenses. Our issue is emotion. Is that we are an industry of we think we know, but we have no idea, and a lot of gatekeepers, and we really need to just get comfortable with being uncomfortable and just unpack some stuff. I haven't got long enough to go through which stuff, but yeah, everybody knows.
That's a whole new panel in itself, so we can call us blackness.
but not skills. We've got some amazing people. It's emotional.
Joe?
Look, I think there are skills deficits in the industry. I think the biggest challenge in marketing is that we're no longer the rock stars of industry. So when I was leaving uni, working anywhere close to advertising was about the coolest thing you could do. And it was harmless. I think now, if you're probably 18 or so, or 16, you know you need to code. And so digital is, and then to be serendipitous with what you're saying actually, I think digital is king, and it's very badly king, because where digital is, every time I interface with digital people, there is no damn story. It's all about ironing out all the creases and all the kind of jinx. And like sometimes, yeah, you want that, but sometimes you want a bit of friction. So it's ironing out the emotion from the experience, and it's that emotion that creates a connection. And to give you a very clear example, if there's any Guinness fans in the room, I am absolutely clear that if you gave a pint of Guinness pour to a UX designer, they would design out the three-quarter pour. And to any avid Guinness fan, that three-quarter pour being ironed out would make it no longer a Guinness. It would make it no longer authentic, because Guinness and connoisseurness and all that sort of emotion of I'm smart enough to know I need to wait is what makes a Guinness. It's part of its brand story. And for me, we've got to get into that space. We've got to be able to talk their language so that we can beat them.
Kelvin?
Yeah, so in terms of the skills of the industry, I think we are lacking some, and I think that's why we're seeing the dissemination of content. That's why we're seeing that there's 1,000 different Hollywoods out there that are able to make that content where we are maybe lacking. So yes, we have, I'm conscious of time, yes, we have some of the skills, but maybe not all of the skills.
Got you. Are there any questions in the audience? Does anyone have a question to ask the panel? If not, then we'll go on.
Oh, hand.
Oh, we do? Oh, yeah, sorry, my love, I didn't see
Joe
it.
already kind of touched on it. I've got a microphone, my voice is loud enough. Joe already touched on it, but I think one of the things I'm really seeing in digital, having been in this industry for a little bit too long and coming from a comms background, is storytelling. Digital, I feel like that has almost diluted quite a lot. So I was going to ask about how important, we talk about purpose, we talk about tech, we talk about all these things and people. How important is storytelling? And I don't want to ask who's doing it well at the moment, to be incorporating what's really important to those audiences, like telling that story alongside them, to your point, Chloe.
The moment that I got into advertising, and what I say at Lucky's is we are the custodians of people's stories. That's our job. It's our duty of care to tell them honestly and transparently. That has always been our job. I think some people don't remember that that's our job. And so I think the difference is storytelling is key in everything that we do, whether you do it digitally, in print, out of home, on TV. It's always about whose stories that you're telling. And I think that's the difference with digital. We are so fast, we're so quick that sometimes we forget that we're telling people's stories. And I think that's the bit that we have to go back to.
And I think that's a really nice point to end the panel on, because actually, for me, that sound bad. It's like mic drop, she's done. Because I think that's what it's about. It's about telling stories, and authentic ones, and resonating with the audience. So thanks for your time today, and lunchtime.
Amazing, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you, Lou. Always